At my grandson's birthday, my daughter-in-law called security. Get this tacky old woman out of here. She had no idea who owned the company where she and her whole family worked. The next day, I demoted them all to bathroom cleaners. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought my own family would treat me like a stranger at my grandson's birthday party, but there I was, standing at the entrance of that elegant venue in downtown Chicago, clutching a carefully wrapped gift for Tommy's 5th birthday, watching my daughter-in-law, Indigo, whisper something to a security guard while pointing directly at me. The look in her eyes wasn't just dismissive, it was pure disgust. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," the security guard said, his voice apologetic, but firm. He was young, probably around my son Marcus's age, and I could see he didn't want to be doing this. "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Tommy's grandmother. This is my grandson's party." That's when Indigo's voice cut through the chatter of the other guests like a knife. "Remove this tacky old woman from here." The conversations around us stopped. Some guests turned to stare at the spectacle unfolding at the entrance. Parents with their children, neighbors, Marcus's colleagues from work, all of them watching as my own family had me escorted out like some kind of criminal. My hands trembled as I held Tommy's gift tighter. Through the crowd, I could see him in his little superhero costume, completely oblivious to what was happening to his grandmother. He was laughing, running around with the other children, beautiful and innocent, and completely unaware that his mother was making sure I couldn't even wish him happy birthday. "Indigo, please," I managed to say, stepping closer to her. She was wearing one of those designer dresses that cost more than most people make in a month. Her hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. Everything about her screamed money and status. "It's Tommy's birthday. I just want to give him his present." She looked at me like I was something disgusting she had found on the bottom of her shoe. "You're embarrassing yourself, Norma. Look around." She gestured to the elegant venue, the perfectly decorated tables, the expensive floral arrangements. "This isn't your kind of place. These aren't your kind of people." The words hit me like physical blows. Not my kind of place, not my kind of people. I was wearing my best dress, the navy blue one I'd bought specifically for special occasions like this. I'd done my hair, put on makeup, even bought new shoes. But apparently, none of that mattered to Indigo. "Where's Marcus?" I asked, looking around for my son. "Where's my son?" He's busy with important guests," Indigo said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "People who actually belong here." The security guard looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I really need you to come with me," he said gently as he guided me toward the exit. I caught a glimpse of Marcus across the room. He was laughing with a group of men in expensive suits, completely unaware of what was happening to his own mother. Or maybe he knew and simply didn't care. The thought made my chest tighten with a pain I hadn't felt since my husband died 15 years ago. "My gift," I said weakly, still holding the wrapped package. "Leave it on the table by the door." Indigo called out dismissively, "Someone will make sure Tommy gets it." But I knew she was lying. I knew that gift would end up in the trash, just like I was being thrown out. As the security guard walked me to the parking lot, I heard Indigo's voice behind us. Already moving on, already forgetting I existed. "Sorry about that, everyone. Some people just don't know their place." I sat in my old Honda Civic for 20 minutes before I could stop shaking enough to drive. The irony of it all was almost too much to bear. Indigo, standing there in her designer dress in that expensive venue, surrounded by luxury and status, telling me I didn't belong. If only she knew the truth. If only she knew that every dollar paying for that party, every cent funding their comfortable lifestyle, every penny keeping that family afloat, came from me. The company where Marcus worked as a regional manager, where Indigo held her fancy marketing director position, where half the guests at that party drew their paychecks. I owned it all. Wellington Industries. 43 years of blood, sweat, and sacrifice, built from nothing after my husband died and left me with a mortgage, a young son, and $57 in our checking account. I'd started with a small cleaning contract and built it into an empire worth $42 million, and I'd done it all in silence, keeping my ownership hidden behind layers of corporate structure and management companies, never wanting Marcus to feel burdened by the weight of my mother's success. I'd wanted him to make his own way in the world. I'd wanted him to earn his position through merit, not because of who his mother was. So I'd stayed in the shadows, living modestly in my small house, driving my old car, shopping at discount stores, all while my company provided comfortable lives for hundreds of employees, including my own family. The family that had just thrown me out like garbage. I started the car and drove slowly home, my mind racing. For years, I'd endured Indigo's subtle cruelty, her backhanded comments about my appearance, my house, my lifestyle. I'd bitten my tongue when she made jokes about my simple ways and limited understanding of their sophisticated world. I'd stayed quiet when she questioned my ability to babysit Tommy properly, when she made it clear that I wasn't the kind of grandmother she wanted for her son. But this was different. This was war. She wanted to see what happened when she pushed too far. She wanted to find out what it felt like to cross the wrong person. Well, tomorrow morning she was going to get her wish. Tomorrow morning, the Wellington Industries was going to undergo some very necessary organizational changes. The Wellington Industries building stood 42 stories tall in the heart of Chicago's financial district. Every morning for the past 15 years, I'd driven past it on my way to the grocery store or the doctor's office, looking up at the gleaming glass and steel structure that bore my name, feeling a quiet pride that no one else could understand. My employees knew me as Mrs. Wellington, the reclusive owner who preferred to work through intermediaries. The few who had met me in person knew I valued privacy above all else. What they didn't know was that Mrs. Wellington and Norma Martinez, Marcus's embarrassing mother, were the same person. I'd built this empire from nothing, and I'd done it the hard way. After Roberto died, I was 39 years old with a 12-year-old son and no real job skills. Roberto had been a good man, but he was old-fashioned. He handled the money, the bills, the business decisions. I took care of Marcus in the house. When that heart attack took him, I realized I didn't even know how to balance a checkbook. The life insurance money lasted 8 months. Then I was on my own. I started cleaning office buildings at night. Marcus would stay with my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, while I worked from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., scrubbing floors, emptying trash cans, cleaning bathrooms. The work was hard, but it was honest, and it paid enough to keep us fed and housed. But I was ambitious. I'd watch the daytime workers in those offices, see how they operated, listen to their conversations about business deals and contracts. I started asking questions, learning how things worked. Within 2 years, I had my own cleaning contract. Within 5 years, I had a crew of 12 people working for me. I reinvested every penny. No new clothes, no fancy dinners, no vacations. Every dollar went back into the business. I learned about commercial real estate, about property management, about corporate services. I studied at night after Marcus went to bed, taking correspondence courses in business management and accounting. By the time Marcus graduated high school, I owned the cleaning contracts for half the office buildings in downtown Chicago. By the time he finished college, I'd branched out into property management and corporate services. By the time he got married, Wellington Industries was worth $28 million. And through it all, Marcus never knew. I wanted him to have a normal childhood, a normal adolescence. I didn't want him growing up thinking he was special because his mother was successful. I wanted him to earn his own way, to develop his own character without the cushion of family money. So I kept living in our modest house in the old neighborhood. I kept driving used cars and shopping at discount stores. I kept being just Marcus's mother, the widow who worked hard to make ends meet. When Marcus graduated from business school, I made sure Wellington Industries had an opening in their management training program, not because he was my son, but because he was qualified. I watched from the shadows as he worked his way up through the company, earning promotions, building his career. I was so proud of him, and he never knew his success was taking place in his mother's company. Then he married Indigo. From the beginning, she made it clear that I wasn't good enough for her vision of the family. Marcus had done well for himself, earning a comfortable 6-figure salary as a regional manager. Indigo had her own position as a marketing director, pulling in another generous paycheck. Together, they could afford the lifestyle she wanted, the expensive apartment, the designer clothes, the exclusive restaurants. But I wasn't sophisticated enough for their world. I wasn't educated enough, wasn't polished enough, wasn't wealthy enough. At least that's what she thought. I endured her comments about my little house and my simple ways. I bit my tongue when she made jokes about my bargain store clothes and my lack of culture. I stayed quiet when she questioned whether I was capable of properly caring for Tommy during the rare time she allowed me to babysit. What hurt the most was watching Marcus change. The boy who used to curl up in my lap to watch movies, who brought me flowers he'd picked from the neighbor's yard, who told everyone his mom was the strongest person in the world, gradually became someone who seemed embarrassed by me. He never defended me when Indigo made her cutting remarks. He never spoke up when she found excuses to exclude me from family gatherings. He just stood by and watched as his wife slowly pushed his mother out of their lives. The breaking point came 6 months ago at Christmas dinner. Indigo had insisted on hosting at their apartment, even though my house had always been the traditional gathering place. When I arrived with homemade tamales and a carefully wrapped present for Tommy, she barely acknowledged me. "Oh, Norma," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "you didn't need to bring anything. We have everything catered." She took my dish and immediately put it in the refrigerator, making it clear it wouldn't be served alongside the expensive spread she'd ordered. During dinner, the conversation revolved around their recent vacation to Napa Valley, their plans to renovate the apartment, Indigo's promotion at work. I sat quietly, trying to engage Tommy in conversation, watching my son laugh and smile with his wife while barely glancing in my direction. When Tommy opened presents, he was polite about the handmade wooden truck I'd spent weeks crafting for him, but his attention quickly turned to the expensive electronic toys his parents had bought him. Indigo made a show of thanking me for the cute little toy, her tone suggesting it was something quaint but ultimately unnecessary. As I prepared to leave that night, I overheard Indigo talking to Marcus in the kitchen. "Next year, maybe we should plan a trip somewhere for Christmas, just the three of us. It would be nice to start our own traditions without having to worry about accommodating everyone." Marcus's response was barely audible, but I heard enough. That might be nice. A change of pace. I let myself out without saying goodbye, and neither of them noticed I was gone. That was when I realized they weren't just neglecting me. But yesterday, at Tommy's party, Indigo had crossed a line she couldn't uncross, having me physically removed from my own grandson's birthday party, calling me tacky and embarrassing in front of dozens of people, treating me like I was some kind of unwanted intruder. She wanted to play games with people's lives. She wanted to use her perceived position and status to humiliate those she considered beneath her. Well, it was time for her to learn that some games have consequences she never could have imagined. I sat in my home office at 6 a.m. the morning after the party, looking at the organizational charts and employee files spread across my desk. Wellington Industries employed over 800 people across 12 different divisions. Marcus worked in commercial property management. Indigo worked in corporate marketing. Both of them reported to directors, who reported to vice presidents, who reported to the executive team that ultimately answered to me. Neither of them had any idea they were working for the tacky old woman they'd had thrown out of their son's birthday party. Neither of them realized that every comfortable aspect of their life existed because of my generosity and protection. But they were about to learn what happened when you bit the hand that fed you. I picked up the phone and dialed my executive vice president, David Chen. Mrs. Chen's son, the boy who used to play with Marcus when they were children, now a successful businessman who knew exactly who I was and what I was capable of. "David," I said when he answered, my voice steady and cold, "it's time to make some changes." David Chen had been like a second son to me. When his mother, Mrs. Chen, watched Marcus during my night shifts all those years ago, the boys had grown up together like brothers. Now, he was my most trusted advisor, the only person in the company who knew the full truth about my identity and my relationship to Marcus. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Wellington?" David asked as we sat in my private conference room on the 42nd floor, overlooking the city where my son and daughter-in-law had humiliated me just 3 days earlier. "This is going to change everything." I looked at the personnel files spread across the mahogany table. Marcus Martinez, Regional Manager, Commercial Property Management Division. Annual salary, $127,000. Performance reviews, consistently exceeds expectations. Indigo Martinez, Marketing Director, Corporate Communications Division. Annual salary, $118,000. Performance reviews, meets expectations with room for growth. "They made their choice when they had me thrown out of my grandson's birthday party," I said, my voice steady. "I've spent 43 years building this company, David. 30 of those years were to provide for Marcus, to give him opportunities to create a future for his family. And this is how they repay me?" David nodded slowly. He'd heard the whole story, seen the hurt in my eyes when I'd called him that morning after the party. "What do you want me to do?" "Reorganization," I said simply. "Wellington Industries is implementing a new efficiency initiative. We're streamlining operations, eliminating redundancies, and restructuring several departments to maximize productivity. The beauty of corporate restructuring is that it can be justified so many different ways. Budget constraints, market pressures, competitive positioning. No one questions it when it's presented properly. Marcus will be transferred from regional manager to building maintenance coordinator. Same hours, different responsibilities. His new salary will be $42,000 annually. That's quite a reduction, David observed. Market rates for maintenance coordination, I replied coolly. Indigo will be moving from marketing director to facilities support specialist, $38,000 annually. David was quiet for a long moment. Norma, he said finally, using my real name. They're going to know something's wrong. This isn't just a demotion, it's a complete career destruction. No, I corrected him. Career destruction would be firing them. This is just repositioning. They'll still have jobs, they'll still have benefits, they'll still be able to provide for their family, just not at the level they've become accustomed to. The truth is, I wanted them to understand what it felt like to struggle, to worry about money, to face the possibility of losing everything they'd taken for granted. I wanted them to learn humility the same way I'd learned it 30 years ago, when I was scrubbing office floors at midnight to keep food on the table. When do you want this to take effect? David asked. Monday morning. And David, I want it to come as a complete surprise. No advanced warning, no preparation time. They should find out the same way they made me find out I wasn't welcome at my grandson's birthday party. That weekend stretched endlessly. I sat in my small living room looking at the framed pictures of Marcus growing up, remembering every sacrifice I'd made. The picture of him in his little league uniform brought back memories of working double shifts to pay for the registration fees. The one of him graduating high school reminded me of the overtime I'd put in to afford his class ring and graduation photos. I thought about the college fund I'd secretly built for him through Wellington Industries, money he'd never known existed. The trust fund I had established for Tommy's education, carefully structured so it couldn't be traced back to me. All the ways I'd tried to take care of my family while staying invisible. Sunday night, I barely slept. I kept imagining Marcus and Indigo getting ready for work Monday morning in their expensive apartment, completely unaware that their comfortable world was about to crumble. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling. Perfect weather for what was coming. At exactly 9 a.m., David sent out the company-wide memo announcing organizational restructuring. At 9:15, department heads received their new organizational charts. At 9:30, affected employees received individual notification emails. I sat in my corner office on the 42nd floor, watching raindrops trace paths down the windows, and waited for the explosion. It didn't take long. At 9:47 a.m., my assistant Jennifer buzzed the intercom. Mrs. Wellington, I have Marcus Martinez on line 3. He's requesting an immediate meeting with senior management about what he's calling an obvious error in his employment status. My heart hammered against my ribs. Hearing my son's name spoken in my office in this context felt surreal. Tell him that all restructuring decisions have been carefully reviewed and approved by ownership. If he has concerns about his new position, he can discuss them with his direct supervisor. Yes, ma'am. 23 minutes later, Jennifer buzzed again. Mrs. Wellington, Indigo Martinez is demanding to speak with someone in authority about what she's calling completely unacceptable and clearly discriminatory changes to her position. I closed my eyes, picturing Indigo's face when she'd called me tacky, when she'd have me escorted out like common trash. Same response. All decisions are final. By 10:30, both Marcus and Indigo had left frantic voicemails for every executive contact they could find in the company directory. By 11 a.m., they were calling in favors from colleagues, trying to reach someone higher up the corporate chain who could reverse what they assumed was some catastrophic mistake. What they didn't understand was that there was no one higher than me. And this wasn't a mistake. David called at noon with an update. Marcus came to see me personally. He looked like he'd been hit by a truck. He keeps asking how this could happen, whether there's some kind of appeal process, if he did something wrong. What did you tell him? I asked. I told him that Wellington Industries is privately held and ownership has absolute authority over organizational decisions. I also mentioned that his new position comes with full benefits and that maintenance coordination is essential work that the company values. I could picture my son's face, the confusion and desperation. Part of me wanted to end this charade, to tell him the truth, to hold him like I did when he was little and scared. But then I remembered standing in that parking lot after being humiliated at my own grandson's party, and my resolve hardened. How did he take it? He asked if I knew who made the decision. I told him all personnel changes ultimately come from Mrs. Wellington, but that she prefers to work through management rather than involving herself directly in operations. And Indigo? She's not handling it well. She's been telling anyone who will listen that this is obviously a vendetta, that someone has it out for them personally. She says she's going to find out who's responsible and destroy them. The irony was perfect. Indigo was absolutely right. This was personal, but she was hunting for an enemy in boardrooms and executive suites, never imagining that the person responsible was the same woman she'd dismissed as beneath her notice. By 2 p.m., I learned through the corporate grapevine that both Marcus and Indigo had spent their lunch break on the phone with headhunters and competing firms, testing the job market. By 3 p.m., they'd both submitted formal complaints to Human Resources demanding investigations into what they claimed was obvious discrimination. At 4 p.m., David appeared at my office door. "They want to know about severance packages," he said quietly. "If they can't get their old positions back, they're talking about leaving Wellington Industries entirely." I turned away from the window where I had been watching the city below. "What did you tell them?" "That employees who resign forfeit any claim to severance compensation, and that Wellington Industries doesn't provide references for voluntary departures unless specifically requested by the receiving employer." Smart man, David. Understood that I wasn't just punishing them, I was trapping them. In the current job market, with their sudden demotion on their records, finding equivalent positions elsewhere would be nearly impossible, especially without glowing references from their current employer. "They're scared," David continued. "Marcus asked me point blank if someone was trying to push them out of the company entirely." "What did you say?" "I told him that Wellington Industries values all its employees regardless of their position in the organizational hierarchy. I also said that many people have built successful careers in maintenance and facility support, and that these are stable, long-term positions with opportunities for growth." That evening, I drove past their apartment building again. The valet was still taking cars, the doorman still opening doors for residents in expensive suits. I wondered how long Marcus and Indigo could afford to live there on their new combined salary of $80,000, less than Marcus alone had been making just that morning. I thought about Tommy, probably playing with his toys right now, unaware that his parents' world was collapsing around him. Would they have to move to a smaller apartment, change schools, give up the lifestyle that had made them feel so superior to his grandmother? As I pulled into my own driveway next to my 15-year-old Honda, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. For the first time since Roberto died, I felt like I had control of my own destiny. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as Marcus and Indigo adjusted to their new reality. But tonight, for the first time in years, I slept peacefully. 3 weeks into their new positions, the cracks in Marcus and Indigo's perfect life were starting to show. I knew this because Wellington Industries was a close-knit company, and word traveled fast when two former executives were suddenly mopping floors and emptying trash cans. David kept me informed about their adjustment period with his usual diplomatic precision. "Marcus is struggling with the physical demands," he reported during our weekly meeting. "Yesterday, I saw him in the lobby cleaning windows. He looked exhausted." I tried to ignore the pain in my chest. My son had soft hands now, manicured nails, muscles that hadn't done real labor in over a decade. Of course he was struggling. But then I remembered how my hands had looked after those first months of cleaning office buildings, cracked and raw from industrial chemicals, bleeding from scrub brushes, and my sympathy faded. And Indigo? "She's having a harder time adjusting to the change in status," he said carefully. "Yesterday, she had to clean the executive bathrooms on the 38th floor. When she ran into Patricia Steinberg from her old marketing team, Patricia didn't acknowledge her, just walked past like she didn't exist." I knew Patricia Steinberg. Ambitious, calculating, the type who only associated with people who could advance her career. The type who would have been all smiles and air kisses with marketing director Indigo Martinez, but wouldn't waste a glance at facilities support specialist Indigo Martinez. "How are their work performance?" I asked. "Adequate. They show up on time, complete their assigned tasks, but there's no enthusiasm, no engagement. They're clearly just going through the motions while they figure out their next move." That was exactly what I had expected. They weren't learning humility or developing character. They were enduring this as a temporary setback while they plotted their escape back to their former status. But what they didn't understand was that escape wasn't going to be as easy as they thought. I'd spent 43 years building relationships in Chicago's business community. Wellington Industries had contracts with dozens of major corporations, and I knew executives at most of them personally. A quiet word here, a subtle suggestion there, and suddenly, Marcus and Indigo Martinez's names were flagged in HR systems across the city. Not blacklisted exactly, that would have been too obvious, too traceable. But their resumes would somehow get lost in the shuffle. Their interviews would be postponed indefinitely. Their references would be mysteriously unavailable when called. The beautiful thing about having real power is that you rarely have to use it directly. You just have to let people know it exists. 3.5 weeks after their restructuring, Jennifer buzzed my office. "Mrs. Wellington, I have Indigo Martinez in the lobby. She's requesting a meeting with you personally." My breath caught. After all these years of carefully maintained separation between Norma Martinez and Mrs. Wellington, my daughter-in-law was about to enter my inner sanctum. Did she say what this was regarding? She says it's about the recent personnel changes and what she calls obvious discrimination. She seems quite agitated. I looked around my office, taking in the expensive furniture, the original artwork, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Everything that screamed wealth and power. Everything that proved I was exactly the opposite of what Indigo thought she knew about me. "Send her up," I said. 10 minutes later, Indigo Martinez walked into my office. She was still beautiful, still perfectly groomed despite her new circumstances. But there was something different about her. A tightness around her eyes, a tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there at Tommy's birthday party when she had been so confident, so cruel. She was wearing her old work clothes, a designer suit that probably cost more than her new monthly salary, trying to maintain the appearance of success as her world crumbled around her. "Mrs. Wellington," she said, extending her hand with that same fake smile I remembered from family gatherings. "Thank you for seeing me." I didn't stand up from behind my desk, didn't offer her a seat, just looked at her with the same cold assessment she'd once given me. "Ms. Martinez, what can I do for you?" "I wanted to discuss the recent organizational changes," she said, still standing, still smiling that brittle smile. "I believe there's been some kind of misunderstanding about my qualifications and value to this company." "Have there been performance issues with your current position?" I asked neutrally. "No, but," she faltered, clearly expecting a different response. "Mrs. Wellington, I have an MBA from Northwestern. I've been in marketing management for 8 years. I increased departmental efficiency by 23% during my tenure as director. Surely there's been some mistake." I leaned back in my leather chair, studying her. She had no idea who she was talking to, no recognition, no connection between the powerful woman behind this massive desk and the tacky old woman she'd humiliated just a month ago. "Ms. Martinez," I said slowly, "Wellington Industries makes personnel decisions based on current business needs and long-term strategic goals. Your previous performance, while adequate, doesn't entitle you to any particular position within the company structure." Her smile finally cracked. "Adequate? My performance reviews have consistently rated me as exceeding expectations." "Meeting expectations," I corrected, having memorized every detail of her file, "with room for growth." "This is ridiculous," she snapped, her composure finally slipping. "Someone obviously has it out for me and my husband. This isn't about business restructuring. This is personal." I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. She was right. Of course this was absolutely personal. But she was searching for an enemy she would never find because she'd never considered that the woman she'd dismissed as beneath her notice could wield this kind of power. "Ms. Martinez," I said, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "Wellington Industries is a privately held company. The ownership group has absolute authority over all operational decisions. If you're unsatisfied with your current position, you're free to seek employment elsewhere." "We've tried," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. "Something strange is happening. Marcus has had 6 interviews in the past 3 weeks, and every single opportunity has mysteriously disappeared. Companies that were eager to meet with him suddenly stop returning calls. It's like someone is sabotaging us." I said nothing, just continued watching her with cool detachment. "You have to know something," she pressed. "This kind of coordinated effort doesn't happen by accident. Someone with real influence is behind this." "I'm sure I don't know what you mean," I replied smoothly. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her mind working, trying to figure out the puzzle. But she would never solve it because she'd never consider that the solution was standing right in front of her. Is there anything else? I asked, reaching for the papers on my desk in a clear dismissal. Please, she said, and for the first time, I heard genuine fear in her voice. We have a 5-year-old son. We have responsibilities, commitments. I don't know what we did to deserve this, but surely there's some way to resolve it. I looked up at her then, really looked at her. This woman who had called me tacky, who had me thrown out of my grandson's birthday party like I was garbage, who had spent years making it clear that I wasn't good enough for her family. Ms. Martinez, I said quietly, sometimes people create their own consequences. Sometimes the universe has a way of teaching us lessons we didn't know we needed to learn. What's that supposed to mean? Instead of answering, I pressed the button on my intercom. Jennifer, please escort Ms. Martinez back to the elevator. As she was let out, Indigo turned back one last time. This isn't over. I'm going to find out who's behind this. After the door closed, I sat in the silence of my office looking out at the city's skyline. In the reflection of the window, I could see myself clearly. Norma Wellington, owner of a $42 million empire. Woman who had built something extraordinary from nothing. Not the tacky old woman Indigo thought she'd dismissed. Not Marcus's embarrassing mother who didn't belong in their sophisticated world. Just someone who had finally decided to stop hiding her true self. That evening, I drove through their old neighborhood, past the luxury apartment building where they could no longer afford to live. According to David's sources, they'd given notice and were moving to a modest 2-bedroom rental across town. The kind of place where Tommy would have to share a bedroom with his parents, where there was no doorman or valet service, where the neighbors worked regular jobs and drove regular cars. The kind of place I'd lived my entire adult life, even after I could afford much better. As I headed home to my small house, I wondered how long it would take them to connect the dots. How long before they realized that their comfortable life had been built on the foundation of my success and that I'd simply chosen to stop supporting it. Tomorrow would mark 1 month since Tommy's birthday party. 1 month since they'd learned what it felt like to have their world turned upside down without warning. But the real lesson was just beginning. 2 months after the restructuring, Marcus called me for the first time since Tommy's birthday party. I was sitting in my kitchen, having my morning coffee and reading the newspaper, when my phone rang at 7:23 a.m. Mom. His voice sounded hollow, exhausted. Can we talk? I'd been expecting this call, but hearing his voice still made my chest tighten. Of course, mijo, what's wrong? Everything, he said, and I could hear him fighting back tears. Mom, everything is falling apart. My job, our finances, our whole life. I don't know what to do anymore. It took everything I had to keep my voice neutral. What happened? You remember I told you I got promoted to regional manager last year? Well, they restructured the company, and now I'm doing maintenance work, cleaning bathrooms, mopping floors, and Indigo, she went from marketing director to basically being a janitor too. That sounds difficult, I said. It's not just difficult, Mom. It's impossible. We can't live on what they're paying us now. We had to move out of our apartment. We had to sell Indigo's car. We're barely keeping our heads above water. And I don't understand why this is happening to us. I closed my eyes, remembering all the times I'd tried to call him over the past few years. All the family gatherings Indigo had found excuses to exclude me from. All the subtle ways they'd made it clear I wasn't welcome in their sophisticated world. Have you talked to anyone at the company about it? That's the thing, Mom. Nobody will give us straight answers. They keep saying it's just business restructuring, but it feels personal, like someone has it out for us specifically. And when we try to find other jobs, the same thing happens. Great interviews, promising opportunities, then suddenly they stop returning our calls. Marcus paused, and I could hear him take a shaky breath. The worst part is how it's affecting Tommy. He keeps asking why we had to move, why Daddy looks sad all the time, why Mommy cries when she thinks he's not looking. He's only 5, Mom. He shouldn't have to see his parents like this. My grandson, my beautiful Tommy, who I'd only been allowed to see from a distance since that horrible day at his party. The thought of him confused and scared because his parents' world was crumbling made my heart ache. "Marcus," I said softly, "maybe you should consider that this might be an opportunity to reassess what's really important in life." "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe this is a chance to remember what matters. Family, love, being there for each other instead of chasing status and appearances." There was a long silence. Then Marcus said, "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "At Tommy's party, when Indigo had you leave, I should have stopped her. I should have stood up for you. I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and I realize I was a coward. I was so worried about making a scene, about embarrassing Indigo in front of her friends, that I let my own mother be humiliated." The words hung between us like a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. "Why didn't you defend me, Marcus?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because I was ashamed," he said, and the honesty in his voice broke my heart. "Not of you, Mom, of myself, of how I'd let Indigo convince me that we were better than our roots, better than where we came from. She made me believe that success meant distancing ourselves from anything that didn't fit the image we were trying to project." I felt tears building behind my eyes. This was the conversation I'd been waiting for, but not like this, not with my son, broken and desperate. "And now?" I asked. "Now I realize that image was built on sand. Everything we thought was solid, everything we thought made us successful and important, it's all gone. And the only person who ever really loved me unconditionally, who sacrificed everything to give me a better life, I pushed away because my wife was embarrassed by her." I had to put the phone down for a moment and compose myself. When I picked it back up, Marcus was still talking. "Mom, I need to tell you something else about the company I work for, Wellington Industries. I've been there for 12 years, and I never really thought about who owned it. It's privately held, very secretive ownership. But lately, with everything that's happened, I've been trying to figure out who's making these decisions about our lives." My heart started racing. I did some research, called in some favors with people in HR, and, Mom, the weirdest thing, the company was founded 43 years ago by someone named N. Wellington. Started as a small cleaning business and grew into this massive corporation. 43 years ago. Mom, that's right around the time Dad died. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. And the more I dug into it, the more coincidences I found. The company's charitable giving, it focuses on scholarships for kids of single mothers. Its employee benefits are incredibly generous, especially for people with families. And Mom, they have this policy about hiring people from working-class backgrounds, giving them opportunities they might not get elsewhere. "Marcus," I kept thinking, who builds a company like that? Who cares that much about families, about giving people chances? And then I remembered something. When I was applying for colleges, money just appeared. You said it was financial aid, but I never qualified for need-based assistance because you were working. When I got married, somehow our down payment for the apartment was exactly the amount we needed. When Tommy was born, his college fund mysteriously had money in it that we'd never deposited. My hands were shaking. Now, Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Are you Mrs. Ann Wellington? The silence stretched between us for what felt like an eternity. 43 years of carefully constructed separation between my two identities, and my son had figured it out through desperation and detective work. "Yes," I whispered. "Oh my God!" His voice was barely audible. "Mom, oh my God! The company where I work, where Indigo works, where we've been complaining about our treatment, where we've been demanding answers from senior management, you own all of that?" "Yes." "The restructuring that destroyed our careers, the blacklisting that's keeping us from finding other jobs, the systematic dismantling of everything we built, that was you?" "Yes." Another long silence. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was different, broken in a new way. Why? I took a deep breath, remembering the humiliation at Tommy's party, the years of subtle cruelty from Indigo, the way my own son had stood by and watched as I was treated like I was worthless. Because you let your wife have me thrown out of my grandson's birthday party like I was garbage. Because for years you've allowed her to treat me like I was an embarrassment to your family. Because you needed to learn what it felt like to lose everything, the way I felt when you chose her over me. Mom, his voice cracked completely. I had no idea about the company, about the money, about everything you'd sacrificed, about how much power you really had. Indigo thought you were just a poor old woman who didn't deserve respect. She thought I was beneath her notice. She thought I could humiliate me without consequences. But why didn't you ever tell me about the company, about the money, about everything you'd built? Because I wanted you to make your own way in the world. I wanted you to earn your success through your own merit, not because you were my son. I wanted you to develop character and strength without the cushion of family wealth. But instead, I developed arrogance and cruelty. Not you, Marcus. You were a good man who got lost. But yes, you forgot where you came from. You forgot who raised you and how hard I worked to give you opportunities. I could hear him crying now. Soft sobs that reminded me when he was little and had scraped his knee or had a nightmare. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm incredibly sorry for the party, for not defending you, for letting Indigo poison my mind against you, for taking everything you gave me and never even recognizing it. I know you are, mijo. What happens now? Are you going to destroy us completely? Are you going to make sure we never recover from this? I looked around my small kitchen at the modest life I'd maintained even while building an empire and realized something important. The anger that had driven me for the past 2 months was finally starting to fade, replaced by something more complex. It depends, I said quietly, on whether you've really learned what I was trying to teach you. He said nothing. And then, in the quiet stillness of that call, I heard something I hadn't heard in years. My son's heart opening again. And now, I wonder, if you were in my place, would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. I truly read them. And don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories like this one. Stories of power, pain, and finding your way back home.